Alright, you have been patient enough. It's time for us to actually write some JavaScript and run it in Node. And as we move forward in this course and we're going to write plenty more code, I think you'll appreciate the importance of having that foundational proper mental model of how things really work. And that would allow us to expand our knowledge in much more completely way. But for starters, we need to actually get started using Node.js. To begin with, we need to install Node.js. If you have already done that before the course began, great. If not, you need to go to nodejs.org, this website. This is also where you will go to find the Node.js documentation. Here on this home page, there is 2 version buttons, and the website will try to figure out which install you most likely need. So you can click on the button to download. Alright, I've already done that. I'm not gonna download it, but you can click on the button and download will start. Okay, I'm gonna start this download. Or you can go to the downloads tab, downloads page here, where you will see that there are windows here. There are Windows and Mac and also Linux installers and the source code itself that we saw before. But we don't want the source code. We just want to install Node and have it running on your computer. So if you haven't installed Node.js yet, you can go ahead and pause the video. Go do that now and then come back. You'll Node.js for the rest of the course. Alright, so we have Node.js installed on Mac. It actually installs an executable file. That is all that source code that we saw before is actually compiled into a single file that runs on my computer. It also installed something called npm. That's very important, and we'll talk about that quite a bit later in the course. The most important thing is that you have Node installed properly, which means you should have access to it, be able to use it inside your command line interface for the operating system you are running. I'm running macOS, and so I've opened the terminal, which helps me make sure that Node.js is available in the command line, but you might be using Linux or Windows. You might be running bash or command prompt or another command line interface. And if Node is installed properly, you should be able to type the command node-v. Node being the program node and -v being an argument, simply saying what version of Node am I running. And I'll hit enter. And there you see the version of Node here. Now you may have a lesser version or a later version, but the idea is that you can run this command and not receive any errors. That means that Node is installed and you can use it properly. The idea being that you can run the Node command no matter what folder or file you're looking at in the command line interface. That Node has just become a command that you can use. For example, in Windows, you might have added Node to your path variable, which means that it's available everywhere in the regular command line, or in Mac or Linux, there is other options. But whatever the case, there is plenty out there on the internet to help you if you have an error. If you have an installation problem or whatever OS you are using, but you need to be at this point before you can move on with this course. You need to be able to type Node and just put -v, hit enter, and you should get the version. If you have that, then you're ready to move on with the rest of the course. Alright, well, it's time. We're going to write some JavaScript in Node. All you have to do is type the word Node in your computer and your command line interface. And again, if this error, you can look at on the internet for help, or you may need to reboot your computer for this to kick, for the command line to be recognized in the command line. But you should be able to hit Node and just hit enter. Let's do it. That will start a command line interface program that comes along with the ride with the node, where I can simply type JavaScript into the command line and get the output back after it's being processed through the V8 engine in Node. So for example, I can say 1 + 1 and I get back the response 2. This is a lot like that little program we looked at before. This JavaScript got passed into Node. Node passed it through the embedded V8 engine as well as whatever extensions that it added to the V8 engine, and we got our response back from that code being executed. I could set a variable, for example, and gets its value back, and that's it. We just wrote some JavaScript and passed it through Node. Exciting. Well, actually pretty simple, but this in a sense is what we are going to do going forward, sending JavaScript through Node, letting Node process our JavaScript, but instead we are going to now let Node process a file. So I'll put my JavaScript into a file. I'll cancel out this one. I'll hit Ctrl+C twice to quit Node, and let's look at creating a JavaScript file. All right, let's take a look at some code. I've created a folder, a directory here on my computer where I'll put the JavaScript files will be running. You might want to do this yourself. We'll be jumping back and forth with different features and creating a fair amount of JavaScript files. And then to do my actual coding, I'll be using Visual Studio Code. You can find it at code.visualstudio.com. It's a Microsoft program, but it works on Linux, Mac, and Windows, and it's designed for coding in a variety of languages. We'll see in a bit why I like to use Visual Studio Code for Node.js development, but you certainly don't have to. You can pick any text editor you like. Brackets is very nice, as well as Sublime Text, even Notepad++, and there's plenty of others, but we'll be using Visual Studio Code because it's going to help us with our Node.js development. So I'll go ahead and open Visual Studio Code. I'll go to File and Open Folder. I'll open Node.js sample folder, and that's empty. Then I'm gonna go ahead and right click, or we can click also on this button to create a new file, and I'll just call it app.js. So I have an empty JavaScript file, so let's write some JavaScript. And if you have noticed, I've increased my font size quite a bit to make it easier to see for the video. I'll type var a equals 1, then var b equals 2, and then var c equals to a plus b. Very simple. Now I'd like to output this. If you're writing JavaScript in your browser, you may have used console.log, which logs data values to the browser console, which helps when you're trying to figure out what's going on with your programs. Node.js was nice enough to provide the exact same concept, and they also called it console.log. Since we are so used to typing that perhaps as JavaScript developers, so I can console.log C. And this works the same as that print command that we saw in our other little program. This will output the value to the command line window. So how can I run this app.js file? So here at the bottom of the window, we have the terminal. If it's not open, you can open the terminal here in the terminal menu and new terminal. Let's save this file. And here in the terminal, if I do ls, I can see my app.js file is sitting here. So I can simply type node and then name of the file that I want to run, app.js. And understand that this is pretty much how you're always going to run your Node applications. You're going to point Node at one JavaScript file. Now, in the next section, we'll see how you can actually use multiple JavaScript files behind that single JavaScript file. But you're always going to give Node an entry point, a single JavaScript file that it will run, that it will execute. So for the terminal, I type Node, the program, and the argument, the app.js is the name of the file. I hit the enter. Node has just read that file, read that JavaScript file and process it and execute it, and here the result, tree. That console.log, and I see the tree, and that's it. I've just run my first program in Node.js, and again, that's pretty much the extent of it. The rest of this course is about what we are actually putting in those JavaScript files. Node is just running it. Now I'd like to show you one other thing before we leave this lecture. Remember how I said Visual Studio Code helps us with Node.js development? And that's why I will be using it in this course. This is a good chance to show you why. I have my app.js file open, and I'll go over this icon, run and debug. The debug area of Visual Studio Code. Now, if this is the first time you have installed it, you may have nothing here. You can just see a couple of buttons. You can just hit this link, create a launch JSON file, and then click on Node.js, and it will actually generate a setting file for launching the application in Node.js. I'll just close it and let's go to the file, and you'll see here the .vs Code folders being created here with launch.json file. You don't really have to worry about much there. Actually, I can just go back to the debug, and now I have this concept of launching app.js. So I can hit a start. What this will actually do is run app.js in Node. It will essentially run that same command. It will run Node and give it app.js as an argument, as the file to run. So I can hit a start and it runs. I've already put a breakpoint here. I have removed it, and let's run the play and see the console.log, the tree. Let's run it again. And if you have noticed that debugger was listening, in other words, Visual Studio Code was listening for the code that's being run. So here in the app.js file and in the left margin here, I can set what's called a breakpoint. For example, I can set a breakpoint at this point, the first line. And here in the debugging window, I'll hit the start again, the play button. But now I've got a debugger attached and listening and the breakpoint here. And so Visual Studio Code pauses my execution on this left-hand side. I can see all the variables here in this window. These are all the variables that I've created and that I have access to. Well, actually, some of the others, very soon we will talk about these kind of variables. But for now, I have a little window here where I can step over or step into. So if this line was a function call, I could jump into the function, or I could jump over it, or I can just step. It's called stepping through the code. So line 1 was run, and now A is 1. I can even put my mouse over A and it shows me 1. B is now 2. It was undefined. Now I can see it's 2. C is undefined until I step to the next line. C is now 3. And I noticed that nothing in console logged yet because I haven't executed this line. I'll just hit continue to let it finish. And if you see the terminal, there's 3, my console.log. So Visual Studio Code lets us step through code in Node.js. For that reason, we'll be using it quite a bit throughout this course, and on occasion, we'll step through code to explain what's happening. You don't have to do this. You could use other tools. You could use your own text editor and simply the terminal to run the program, and output console.log and other things to help you along the way. That's entirely up to you, but I'll be using Visual Studio Code, which I actually like to use it in real life development as well, because it's going to help us with understanding Node.js. All right, let's move on.